Good evening, ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties. This is Alex coming at you from the underworld, and welcome back to another episode of Alright everyone, I know it has been a minute since I've done an update video, but I thought I would go in and take this opportunity and let everyone know what's been going on in my life. So I ended up landing a job that I wanted. So that has been really, really good. And so far, I like everyone I work with. They all seem very sweet. They are very patient as I'm learning. And what's really funny is a couple of months ago, my best friend Connie came over and gave Carrie and I all of these totes of yarn. And she said that they had belonged to her aunt, which her aunt had wanted to take up knitting and crochet. And she discovered that it just wasn't for her. So she gave Connie all of her yarn to give to us, which, by the way, if you're watching, Aunt Christy, thank you so much for that. And as soon as we received the yarn, I had started working on what was potentially a girl's baby blanket that I was going to sell to God only knows who. But I had started working on that, and that was around the time that I was still at my last job. But as I was hunting for jobs and I landed the perfect interview, and I say perfect because the lady who interviewed me, we actually had a lot of mutual acquaintances. And the funny thing was, she mentioned to me that she was about to become a grandmother because her daughter was about to have a baby. And I was like thinking to myself, wow, that's pretty cool. I mean, I was thinking, well, I've been working on a baby blanket, but I didn't say that out loud yet. And I asked her, I said, so, what uh what are we expecting? And she said a girl. And at that point, I'm like, well, you will not believe it, but I've been working on a baby blanket that is intended for a baby girl. And I said, this is definitely something that you will have as soon as I'm done with it. Which at the moment, I'm about a skein and a half into this blanket. And I'm probably going to do about another skein and a half just because I want to make it big enough for the baby to enjoy through toddler years and all that good stuff. But yeah, this is the colors that I have with it so far. And I'm just going to continue on with these colors. So, yeah. But the new job is nowhere near as stressful as the last job I had. And as a matter of fact, at the end of the day, I can come home and still have brain cells to function versus how at the other job I just felt completely drained physically, mentally, and spiritually. And by the time I came home, all I wanted to do was just eat and go to sleep. So I'm really happy that I do finally have a job that is allowing me to balance my work life with my work life online. So, yeah, I feel like this is going to be probably my forever job, or at least the job I have for the next 10 to 20 years. So, we will definitely just take a day at a time, but at the moment, I do really feel like I am in a good place. And aside from that, we did, of course, finish the book review for Lasher, and I am currently working on the book review for I'm Thinking of Ending Things, which that book scared the hell out of me. I saw the movie adaptation of it, and I was really let down because I'd say about 75% of the movie truly followed the book. but then the ending of it opted out for a conclusion that just wasn't really well explained for people who had not read the book, and also the ending wasn't anywhere near as grim or as frightening as what the book presented. So I was let down with that, but overall, the actors and actresses did a good job. And I did finish reading Ghoul. I did enjoy it, even though I did not enjoy it as much as I did Headhunter. But Ghoul by Michael Slade was still pretty good. And I ended up figuring out what we were dealing with around, I'd say, about maybe the third part of the book. But my only one complaint about that book is whoever the editor was, they definitely need to tell the authors to pull back on their long winded descriptions of like technology and just meaningless history that really didn't add anything to the story. So I feel like the book could have easily been about. I'll be generous. The book could have easily been about 50 pages less, and would have been it still would have been long enough to get what we needed, but I don't think it would have been as long-winded. But I would definitely say, yeah, 50 pages less, maybe just a little bit more, but I do feel like the book had some missed opportunities with some of the characters that it introduced, which I'll get into that when I review that book. But the next book I am going to dive into is Taltos by Anne Rice, which I plan to buddy read that with Carrie, Connie, and Tammy. So we will definitely get that knocked out of the TBR pile pretty soon. And I did receive a really awesome package today from one of my good online friends named John, which I haven't opened it yet, but I think this is as good of time as any to go in and crack that baby open and see what I received. All right, time to see what this is. Oh, okay, so I ended up getting a little keychain that says, "To my best friend, because of you, I laugh a little harder, cry a little less, and smile a lot more. Love ya." That is cute. Thank you, John and Rick. And, oh, nice. A horror calendar. Love it. And it has cats on it. So it's kind of funny because when I said I had a horror calendar with cats on it, Carrie comes walking into the room. But yeah, that is adorable. And it shows my favorite one out of these is probably the cat riding the shark from Jaws. That is a lot of fun, and also the cat version of Gizmo. Like, all right, I'm gonna hold that one up because that's just too flippin' cute. And I'll go on and show off the Jaws one as well. That is so badass. Love it. I can tell this is a book. Oh, nice. Okay, so this is a book that John was telling me about. It's called Full Service. And this is like all of the nasty little details of celebrities in Hollywood. All of their sex scandals, their fetishes, all that good stuff. So that's going to be fun. Oh, yes. Thank you. I've wanted to read this. Like, oh my God. Did I mention this to you, John? I think I did. I think maybe I did. But I have been wanting to read this. I know that the movie looks like it's going to be comedic. I don't know if the book is as well, but this is going to be a lot of fun. Oh, I forgot. John said for me to look through the books. There's something in between. Oh, cool. The Girls in 3B, a postcard. So, yeah, that's cute. I got another book. Oh, thank you, John. All right, there we go. The glare's off of it. Christmas Gothic short stories. Ah, thank you. I love these. I still need to review the the Victorian Christmas Ghost Stories Volume 2. I ended up just reading over that again last Christmas because I had lost all of my notes, but I definitely have those ready for this upcoming year. Okay, out of all of the stories in here, there are maybe 4 that I've read in the Victorian Ghost Stories collection, and the 4 that's listed, those were really, really solid stories. But as far as the other tales are concerned, none of these look familiar. But I am very excited to dive into this, and I love the whole aesthetic of this. I truly, truly do. So thank y'all so very much for this. I absolutely love everything you sent us. And this is just, I can't get over all of the books. Y'all are so awesome. Thank you. As I had mentioned in one of my previous videos where we were just chilling and hanging out together, I had mentioned that I was going to read more of the horror-zines that Hanny had sent to me. And this is volume 2, and it is The Vampire's Journey from Evil, Bram Stoker versus Jim Jarmusch, which, if you're unfamiliar with Jim Jarmusch, you really need to check out his work, as he was a driving force behind the independent film scene of New York. So definitely just go to IMDb, and his list of movies are plentiful. But this says, though endowed with many strengths, it is the vampire's adaptability throughout the ages that have made them into the successful monsters they are today. Originating as the demonic creatures of folklore, often to explain the rapid spread of disease, the vampire has evolved into a sophisticated, highly adaptable vehicle for the fears and insecurities of the time. Most other monsters seemed antiquated in contrast, occasionally pulled out and dusted off to shine for a moment, only to fall back into the annals of cultural consciousness. Perhaps the vampire is still merely explaining the diseases that mystify us, only we have traded diseases of the body for those of the consciousness, society, and our very nature. This issue will explore the evolution of the vampire as a metaphor by examining key themes and contrasting the vampires of Dracula by Bram Stoker with the vampires of Jim Jarmusch's 2014 film Only Lovers Left Alive. So this starts off stating, traditionally, the vampire represents a pure form of evil. It is inhuman, animalistic in its appetite, and perverse in its nature. Humans, by contrast, are God's creatures, made in his image, and ultimately a force for good. However, in Jim Jarmusch's film, the vampire occupies the mortal and intellectual high ground. In Jarmusch's Only Lovers Left Alive, the main trouble the protagonists are dealing with is mass consumerism and industrialization. However, it's not vampires but humans who are representing this never-appeased appetite. It sums this up by saying Jarmusch's vampires have evolved from Stoker's concept of immoral destructors of good into genuinely appreciative preservers of life. His vampires despair at humanity's culture of excess and instant gratification, viewing humankind and its unquenchable appetite as a force of destruction and the eventual cause of the end of civilization. If vampires are the reflection of our fears, then this evolution and role reversal are more than merely the trope of the sympathetic vampire. Rather, Jarmusch's vampires serve to reflect the modern fear that humanity's ambition has become its own worst enemy. Dracula, by contrast, is careful to avoid moral ambiguity regarding its vampires, and just as careful to maintain the image of purity and goodness in its humans. Bram Stoker accomplishes this by only referring to Count Dracula and his kind in animalistic terms or by qualities which are deemed morally abhorrent, such as wantonness or violence. In doing this, Stoker establishes the vampire as an unreliable creature, vile by nature, and grossly at odds with humanity. Now, to sum this up, it states that Stoker establishes human protagonists in the light by describing them and their characteristics, as well as their positive relations to one another, such as friends, fiancé, so on and so forth. Furthermore, the humans pit themselves against the destructive and moral forces of the vampire, cementing their black and white distinction. And it's even given an example here of the contrast of good, evil, positive, negative, what have you. Immortality, as it pertains to vampires, is regarded as a state of eternal damnation, as the vampire is left to roam Earth for eternity as a slave to their profane nature. The everlasting life of the vampire is godlike, but blasphemous. It can be gifted to another, but at the price of their soul and humanity. In Only Lovers Left Alive, Jarmusch uses the immortality of his protagonists to explore and comment on cultural history, exposing the cyclical nature of life. Immortality becomes a metaphor for intellectual accumulation and hard-won perspective. To live for centuries means to have seen centuries worth of art, music, literature, politics, uprising, collapses, and rebirths. Which, that summary reminds me of a book that Hanny and I read a few years ago, which I blab about this book nonstop because it was such a great book. But that reminds me a lot of The Delicate Dependency by Michael Talbot. If you haven't read it, it is definitely a book to blow your mind. If you are the kind of person who has to have an answer at the end of the book to sum everything up and have it all nice and wrapped up for you, then that is not the book for you, because it does end with an open ending and you are supposed to use your own instinct or what you've gathered from the story to figure out what the protagonist is going to do. And since that book is one huge gaslighting extravaganza, I am still on the fence to if the protagonist did what was right or not. So, yeah, that book is always going to stay with me. And personally, I don't want to know if he did what was right or not, because that's one of the fun aspects of that book. It's simply not knowing. So, if you haven't read it, definitely read it. Anywho, back to what I was saying. In this way, Eternal Life has instilled in the vampire a kind of faith and optimism for the endurance of existence, while also providing a source of depression as these immortal beings watch humanity commit the same mistakes, seemingly never learning from their collective past. Again, this is something that we see with The Delicate Dependency. It's such an underrated book. Oh my god, it's criminally underrated. But back to what I was saying. By stripping Eternal Life of its moral and religious trappings, Jarmusch redefines the curse for a modern audience. Immortality is nothing more than a wealth of time with which to experience and gain knowledge of the world. A far cry from Bram Stoker's blasphemous state of damnation perpetrated by the destruction of life. In Dracula, it is the nature of the vampire's immortality more than anything that casts them into the realm of the godless. Count Dracula is the corrupted image of Christ, promising eternal life to his followers by damning them to his state of inexhaustible appetite and violence. He is blasphemous, too, for the fact that he imparts the ability to give eternal life to his victims, who thus becomes minor gods themselves. further undermining and mocking the image of Christ. To the protagonist of Dracula, this is a fate worse than death. Since conception, vampire lore has experienced a gradual evolution. Indeed, the vampires of today are virtually unrecognizable from the creatures of folklore. So that is really interesting because a couple of years ago I read Carmilla by J. Sheridan Le Fanu, which I believe that predates Dracula by about 50 years. But in regards to the lore of Carmilla and how different it was from what we saw with Dracula, I really feel like it plays on the religious spheres of people because if I remember correctly, in Carmilla, vampires were created by people who had committed suicide and they were damned to walk the earth as the undead. So, from what I remember of that, that was the concept there, and I thought it was really cool. Also, it is a lot of fun for LGBTQ plus horror fiction, as that's actually the first lesbian vampire, I believe. So definitely check that out. Continuing forward, it says first, the vampire was a grotesque monster that frightened people and was excluded from human contact. Later, he became a fascinating and noble character with a closer relationship with people, and most recently, the vampire has been represented as an emotional and introspective personality. In this way, the alteration in the appearance and metaphor of the vampire reflect an evolving relationship with the cultural anxieties of time. Jarmusch's Only Lovers Left Alive reflects our growing sympathy for the monster that has blossomed over time. By depicting the role of the vampire not as a force of destruction and death, but as an appreciator of life and art who despairs at the destruction of the world, Jarmusch endowed his vampires with an intellectual and moral depth lacking in vampire lore. The treatment of eternal life in Only Lovers Left Alive is vastly different from its depiction in Dracula and indeed most other vampire adaptations. Whether this alteration enhances vampire lore is debatable, as by removing religious damnation, one might argue that the history and origin of the vampire are either lost or unrecognizable. However, others might argue that this freedom from damnation signifies a conquering of the vampire's undesirable compulsions. The latter position is supported by Jarmusch's lead protagonists, Adam and Eve, who reject excess, are in a centuries-old monogamous relationship, and consider the act of drinking blood by biting a human to be archaic. Jarmusch evolves the vampire into a creature whose excess of time and ability to conquer is turned inward, suggesting that even the most damning aspects of our nature can be tamed and turned into something nourishing. Which, that's a really beautiful image there. So that's really sweet. To conclude, The Vampire from its conception has served as a means of exploring the external and internal conflicts, anxieties, and fears of time. The vampire has evolved from a loathsome, grotesque creature designed to repel and incite fear to an animalistic man perverse and profane by nature, designed to seduce and destroy, to a creature of moral and ethical standing, able to despair at the destruction of the world and appreciate the complexity of life from the perspective gained by immortality. So, even though this isn't vampire related, there is a shout out on the back for the movie Straight Jacket, which was directed by William Castle. It's definitely one of my favorite Joan Crawford films, and the acting is just over the top and it's a lot of fun. If you haven't seen it, definitely watch it. It's Joan Crawford at her horror peak. But It says, belonging to the humorously named psycho biddy genre, Straight Jacket does a wonderful job of keeping its audience on its toes. Joan Crawford plays an aging axe murderess who comes home after 20 years to finally see her daughter again and reclaim the life that she lost the night she brutally killed her husband and his girlfriend. But history has a way of repeating. Yeah, that movie was a lot of fun, and you definitely need to see it. But back about vampires. When I first started this channel, I said that vampires weren't my favorite creature, and I really didn't have too much of an interest in them. And after having read some of the books that I have, such as Carmilla or The Delicate Dependency, I really have to admit that I do like vampires more than I thought I would. As a matter of fact, I do have a few more vampire books on my TBR. One of those is Let the Right One In by John Avid Lindquist. Another one is the Grady Hendrix book about the Southern Book Club Guide to Slaying Vampires. I think that's the name of it. And I do have Salem's Lot on my TBR as well. I do intend to include more Anne Rice onto my future TBRs, especially with her vampire series or her Vampire Chronicles. As a matter of fact, as many of you know, I'm just wrapping up her Mayfair Witch trilogy, and from there I'm going to read other authors and then circle back to her and start with the Vampire Chronicles, which I had read the first 3 books back when I was a teenager, and I thoroughly love those. So yeah, I definitely do have quite a few vampire books on my TBR, and of course, at some point, I would like to go back and revisit Dracula by Bram Stoker, as I've yet to review that book for this channel. But out of the vampire books that I mentioned, if there are any others that I may have left out, please bring that to my attention, because I would totally like to expand my horizons on vampires, especially since when I first started this channel, I really didn't consider all of the different ways that a vampire can be used to represent the time in which it takes place. So, yeah, definitely load me up. I'm honestly not looking for vampire romance, so nothing like Twilight, nothing like that. I'm not into it. I don't care for romance unless there's blood, guts, and sex and all that good stuff in it. So, yeah, if it's going to be a vampire romance, definitely make it true horror and not Twilight. But yeah, that is everything for this video. I hope y'all enjoyed it. Thank you so very much for being understanding, because I know it's been a minute since I posted one of these. I will definitely do better about that. But now that we're at the end of this video, I would just like to note, if you would care to follow me on social media or contribute to my Patreon or join this channel as a member, links to all of that are available in the description section of this video. And if you have not subscribed to this channel, be sure to subscribe and click that notifications bell, because I do have more videos coming in the near future. As a matter of fact, the next one I load should be the book review for I'm Thinking of Ending Things, which that was one hell of a book. But anywho, until we see each other again, I hope you have a great week and sweet nightmares.